Is society ripe for a megalomaniac? Well, folks, we seem to live in a country, that, at least here in the United States and other countries, that call themselves democracies. But they're quickly devolving into wanting a stronger and stronger leader, a president or a king. And people who aren't really qualified to take those positions are falling to megalomania. Putin, for instance, started off as the president, but then he became a basically dictator for life over Russia. Now he sees himself as an emissary for God to reunite Russian and Ukrainian Orthodoxy together. The next step is to declare yourself God himself. You see that throughout history. Are there any other examples in history, Tim, where people, they started off with the right idea, but soon it just went to their head?
There's so many examples throughout history. It's almost the tendency of mankind. You know, Nimrod was a great leader back in his day. We know that his descendants tried to create the Tower of Babel. Over and over again in Scripture, those who present themselves as being a contrast to God and trying to create an empire, most of the time in the pagan kingdoms surrounding Israel. But in recent years, we've had a number of examples. You mentioned Mr. Putin. Obviously, just in this last century, we've had Adolf Hitler. The premier or president over in China right now, Mr. Xi, obviously is heading in that direction. And throughout human history, there's been Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Napoleon. Napoleon was such a megalomaniac, he didn't even deem anybody else worthy of crowning him, so he crowned himself to be emperor of France. And yet we see so many today who are embracing this concept who ought to know better. And of course, there was a time when this was the stuff of science fiction. So you can look back, Dr. Moreau, written by H.G. Wells, who had his own island and was really a megalomaniac. Captain Nemo to a degree. Just in the recent past, America's production of movies and television programs featured almost a sci-fi version. You had people like Count Carlos Mazeppi on the Wild Wild West. I saw an episode of this recently where it was this crazy man who wanted to rule the world, and that was clearly considered to be ridiculous. And then you had people like Khan on the Star Trek show that later became a movie. And these people were megalomaniacs, but now we have folks who ought to know better suggesting that we need a great leader, sort of a Führer figure like Germany embraced, to lead us out of our economic woes. And I think it's setting the world up for the Antichrist.
Well, the Bible prophesied in the end times that a revived Roman Empire would rise again. What's interesting is for hundreds of years, as you know, the Roman Republic was a republic. They had senators. You could vote if you were in a certain position. And they gave it up for an emperor who could get things done. And I think that's what we're seeing throughout the world, that society, there's so many people and politics have gotten so complex and so gridlocked, especially in times of disasters, like when COVID came through, or you heard WHO says, we need this global government to manage natural disasters like that. And there's natural disasters all over the place happening. And as we read in the Bible, they will increase in frequency and intensity as the Lord comes. But they all want to cut through the bureaucracy and set up I think, group of men first, but eventually we know biblically that out of a group of 10 men, one will rise who will call himself the Antichrist and demand the world worship him. And it seems like even 10 years ago when I was talking with some friends and they're like, I don't see a call for global government. Now that we're past pandemic, it seems like there's a call for global government.
There is, and you make a good point, Nathan. A lot of people are tired of the challenge of getting a law passed through a legislature. Look at our own Congress. It's gridlocked completely. And so they say, well, we don't want to wait on Congress to come up with a solution or even just to declare laws. Let's go to the Supreme Court and let those 9 individuals, whether it's Roe versus Wade and the legalization of abortion or other things, especially the left wants to give that power and authority to a smaller and smaller group. Or as we recently discussed, our own president, by executive order, erasing hundreds of billions of dollars of student loan debt, although he did not have that authority, either according to the Constitution or by his own testimony. And yet he did it because there would be no other way to get that law or that provision passed. So people will embrace things that they like or that they see in the short term giving them benefit. But Jesus himself talked about, he said, is it not this way among you? But whoever wishes to become great will be your servant. He's contrasting that attitude that we as Christians exhibit against the pagans and those who are differently motivated, who say, that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them and that their great men exercise authority over them. This has always been the tendency of humanity, to seek a great leader and to unify around them. We have always looked down upon the dictatorships of the world, even in the Middle East, where these great leaders supposedly convince all their people to follow them right off a cliff. But we've thought, well, we're smarter than that. We are going to be a republic that represents democratic values, and yet today we're allowing these so-called great leaders, not meaning they are great, but they are exerting great power, drive us off a cliff.
Right. And these manufactured disasters and the real disasters coupled seems to have made the pulse of the world say, we need stronger leadership. We need a Messiah figure to step up. And he's got to be a peacemaker. Well, the Bible prophesies that this one world ruler who will come out of a revived Roman Empire out of Europe will come as a peacemaker. He will fix the bankruptcy that's looming and all the economists are saying is coming right now. He'll supposedly be able to stop the storms and fix the weather, but like universal concept, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this person, whether he starts satanically inspired and possessed or eventually it happens at the midpoint of the tribulation, the power goes to his head. And by the middle of this tribulation time period, it's going to come on the world, will demand that the entire world worship him. That is ultimate megalomania.
It certainly is. We have an example in a great individual in Scripture, that being Joseph, who went and advised the Pharaoh how to overcome the great adversity of the 7 years of want that would occur. But over time, he advised the Pharaoh to essentially gain control of the entire society's land.
He owned everything by the end of the
Pharaoh owned everything. And people were serfs serving, again, the Pharaoh. And so even our well-intentioned efforts to overcome disaster and to provide for people can eliminate freedoms that we have always enjoyed. Folks, our encouragement to you is don't look for a great leader that comes from the human race. There is one, Nathan, we know, who has already provided freedom from sin and from want. Who is that?
Messiah, Jesus Christ.